I'm very big on deferring to experts, and kind of like we were mentioning, there's a lot of people who are physical experts with movements and stuff in our space, like our specific space in San Diego here at Invictus. But there's also experts. I talked to Kyle Ruth from Training Think Tank. He's the one who put me onto the BFR setup. I talked to my conditioning coach about ways to work on conditioning outside of it. There's so many people who've already encountered these problem sets. There's nothing really new under the sun. So you can ask other people. Will Morad actually had broke his hand before last year's games. He doesn't tell anybody that, but he broke his hand for last year's games, and he still ended up doing pretty well. So there's these things that already kind of been built out. And if you've established the relationships with people to where you can, ask these questions and they know that you'll respect their opinion and that you have a good enough relationship to get with the information that you need from them, I think, again, all problems are solvable.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Invictus Mindset Podcast. Today's guest is a CrossFit Games athlete, a West Point grad, a Puma athlete, and one of the hardest working people I've ever met. My man, Chandler Smith. Welcome to the show, dude.
What's up? Hey, I'm happy to be here. It's cool. I like an introduction where you throw subjectivity in with objectivity. Like, I'm definitely a West Point graduate. Am I a hardworking guy? Probably not, but you can't really.
I mean, to my humble lenses, you are. I get to see you working on your craft every day and overcoming adversity, and I'm a pretty judgmental dude, so to see you getting after it every single day is quite the honor.
It's Photoshop.
Well played. Just like the abs, right?
Yeah. A lot of people don't know that. I think it's hard work, but yeah, mostly Photoshop.
Totally, man. You just came off a hell of a weekend. Pretty cool stuff up at semifinals there in Pasadena.
Oh, yeah. That was a good time. Yeah.
You did a little something up there. What's it like emotionally coming on the other side of that, right? Like, it's kind of a little bit of a peak in pursuit of the CrossFit Games. And, we're a few days past that now, and you're a little bit in recovery mode. Your wheels are turning a little bit, thinking about how to plan out the rest of your season. But where are you at right now, and how do you feel, the week after semifinals?
I think this one is actually probably the closest I've been towards celebrating anything in a while. I'm pretty notorious for anybody who's close to me, like Jesse and Noah and all my friends know, like the day after competition, I'm normally not a super pleasant person. It always feels like, when you hit this goal, I think we always tell ourselves, we hit this goal, I'll have this rush of emotion and I'll feel better.
I'll be happy when.
I'll be happy, exactly. But the goalposts, always end up moving. And I think that having had that happen so many times, my response to it is to just not really lean into being that happy, because I know I'm just inevitably, when you do a good job, there are more requirements that come from it. Like, I get the pleasure or the privilege of training for the CrossFit Games now, but like that does require you to think and everything like that. So I normally end up trying to aggressively overcorrect the tendency that you would normally have to be happy, and that ends up making me kind of dour and like hyper focused afterwards. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to enjoy this one a little bit, because it was a pretty significant thing for me to do after missing it last year. So I'm trying to take a couple of days to actually be happy. It's a weird zone to be in, but we're maybe doing it a little bit this time around.
Totally, man. This is also an exceptionally special one. Your wife also qualified for her very first CrossFit Games. I wish she was here. I want to give her another hug. It almost like makes me a little bit emotional to see, because the two of you get to do this thing together, and you get to celebrate together. And, 10 years in the making for her, dressed like a Power Ranger with her teammate, Emily Lugman.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you to be able to celebrate this with your wife and to kind of do the dance in slightly different lanes, but in pursuit of something very similar?
I think that's probably where a lot of the ability for me to like actually enjoy and be happy for this weekend comes from, because us moving out here was in no small part predicated by her wanting to be on a team that was going to go to the CrossFit Games. And she has the ability to, she's just probably a happier person than I am, right? So she has a joy that she experiences life with on a daily basis that I don't necessarily have. And she is so happy about reaching this goal that she spent a decade chasing, that I can't help but be happy for her. And in being happy for that person who's my other half, like, I think I also am learning to be a little happier for myself. But it's awesome. Like, I think something I really enjoy and get a lot of satisfaction out of is when a plan comes together, and this kind of feels like a plan coming together. We switched things up and moved across the country and made a bunch of changes, but the goal was for both of us to make the CrossFit Games, and we reached that goal together. So all those things coming together have made it like a very, very special occasion.
Totally cool, man. And you put up a really cool Instagram post that I greatly admired, which was 10 years from now, I'm not going to remember the specificity of the workouts, but I'm going to remember who I got to pursue, the peak expression with.
Yeah.
And some of that's training partners, some of that's coaches, some of that's friends, and the tribe that you've oriented yourself with and the vibes that come with that. What does it mean to you to every single day you get to do what you love with who you love?
Yeah.
And now in retrospect, like I always say, it's a mystery looking forward, but science looking back. And it makes sense, right? Like that both of you are now going to pursue the 2023 Noble CrossFit Games together. But to me, it's like, it makes sense because of who you've surrounded yourself with. What does it mean? I mean, starting off with Bickle. I mean, that dude brought so much energy this year. For those of you that don't know, Matt Bickle's been a guest on our show before. A huge part of the Invictus community, has brought so much energy and so much love and support. What does it mean to you to be able to like train with some of your best buddies and celebrate this in the process?
It's what makes this whole thing worth it. And that's probably, now that you said that, I think that's another reason why this is an occasion that I may be able to enjoy a little bit more than I have in the past, because Bickle and Sam and Jesse and the Martin, like everyone is so invested on a daily basis that I want to honor the energy that they put in, because they're happy and they're celebrating. So I think it kind of bleeds into me feeling better about what I'm doing as well. But we do have a really, really cool crew. And I think one of the things I'm most pumped about is the chance to continue to get to train with you and Matt and everybody who hops in for stuff over the course of the, our average week. Like all of the people who come to play volleyball, we get to keep doing this for another couple of months. And also because this is my job and I now, have the ability to probably pursue this for another year longer than I may have if I hadn't made the games. Like, we can also potentially do this again next year. We've had so much fun this year. We've got a cool crew that goes out to trivia. We've got a crew of people who, plays volleyball all the time. We go to yoga. We got a walk club. Like, we just have a very, very good sense of community out here. And me going to the games more than anything, I think allows me and Jesse to continue to fulfill our, roles in the community, because we've taken care of the stuff that we need to. And when you have taken care of yourself, then you're able to pour into other people. But like that same energy is getting reciprocated by everybody else around, and it's just built a strong community. And now we can continue to build it more going forward. So that's really exciting. For sure. Something I want to reveal to our listeners and our audience is you operate without an elitist mindset. Sometimes like people that are at the top of their craft are like, oh, I'm elite. Those people shouldn't have access to me. But you're so good at being all inclusive. And, sometimes that's, Bickle jumping in on machine workouts. Sometimes it's me doing stuff with wall balls with you. And, sometimes it's some of our other athletes doing gymnastics things. And, fortunately we have the categories of people that we can kind of pull from in certain arenas so we can get appropriately pushed. But you do such a good job. Like me personally, when I jump in with you, I scale or customize things, but still try to push you in certain modalities. We've done EMOMs where maybe I change the movements a little bit, but I'm still next to you trying to push you. How have you developed that level of acceptance and realizing that like, hey, that person has different goals and different intention, but I can still use that to help motivate and inspire myself towards my specific goal? It's actually really interesting that you brought that point up, because I know exactly where I got that from. And there's a saying that we have in the Army, and when I was in the Army, I remember hearing it a lot, and that's, you go to war with the army you have, not the one that you want, right? So like you don't get to pick the soldiers. You don't get to draft them like you're a GM. You show up to your unit and you've got guys, some of them are good, some of them are less good, but like regardless of their skill sets, you have to find a way to make them do like whatever it is that you need them to do. I love that. I feel like I've always kind of applied that everywhere I've gone, and every time I've had success. I don't need necessarily people who are world-class CrossFit athletes, but if they have a willingness to do whatever it is they're capable of, that's the inspiration to me, because I don't think I love fitness enough by myself to do it alone. So what I need from other people is for them just to participate. And I think the exchange that occurs is maybe like they get to get pushed or maybe do something they wouldn't necessarily want to do otherwise, because I have kind of a job approach to it where I will do a lot of things that maybe I don't want to do, but I recognize they'll make us better. But within that exchange, as long as the person is willing to do it, even if they slow down, as long as they just don't quit, they're giving me all the tools I need to be successful. And then I think I'm also, with the experience I have in this space and everything, like maybe able to give some of that knowledge or skill set or workout formation back. But it feels like it's an even exchange. So I don't see how you could be elitist in a setup like that, because both parties in this case are giving something that the other person or group needs.
Reciprocity at its finest.
Yeah.
Right. And an even exchange just leads to all tides rising, which is incredible to watch.
This weekend, actually,
I love that. And just to reiterate that, like, you go to war with the army you have, not the one that you want. I just think that's very special. And you've mentioned a few times West Point and the Army. When did that land on your radar? In your upbringing, when was that something that you're like, hey, I want to go there? When did that opportunity come to float to the surface for you?
So there was a few things that kind of got me interested, but the main points were I was 6 years old, and I think we had just finished a history class. That was my favorite class. We were reading something about World War I, and for Christmas that year, I asked for a book about war, and I got a book about war, and there was a bunch of West Point generals and everything who were doing things in World War I and World War II, and so that was kind of the first thing that got me interested. And then as time progressed, I was not good enough to play basketball in high school. Unlike you, I'm terrible at basketball. So I ended up wrestling my freshman year. Not really by choice, but it is what it is. And our wrestling coach was a former West Point wrestling team captain. His name was Nage Damas. He passed a few years ago, but he was an incredible guy. Taught me how to work hard. I don't think I'd really had a good idea of how to do it up until that point. And our team captain that year was another guy who I think believe he's still in the Army, Major Doug McFarland. And those two guys showed me how to work, but also most importantly, there was a time where I quit the team and they cared enough to bring me back on. And that example that those guys set of coming out to the common area and finding me and bringing me back into the team after I said that I was done, like that left an impression on me as a freshman in high school. That's the type of man I want to be. Some other things happened, like West Point ended up being the best school in the country the year that I was getting ready to apply, and I was like, that's cool too. But I decided probably a long time before that or things had already kind of been pushing me in that direction, that it was the place I wanted to go. And I realized also that I might have a chance to walk onto the wrestling team there, and everything kind of came together. So it felt like I didn't apply anywhere else. Everything in my life seemed to be pointing me towards that from, I guess you could say, from the time I was 6 years old. So,
well, a couple things to unpack there. The first one, what led to you quitting the wrestling team? What were the intrinsic thought processes, and how did you ultimately surrender to this group of people that truly believed in you?
Yeah, so I was a freshman, and it was my first year. Wrestling is a very technical sport. I won, a few matches and everything, but I was not dominating. I wasn't wrestling even at the JV level. I was wrestling only against other freshmen, and so your season ends a little bit earlier than the guys who are wrestling varsity, trying to go to state and all these other things. And so since my season was done and I was only getting beat up by the older guys at this point in the season, I was like, this is not very fun. And some of the practices we had it was stuff that was, even to this day, if I had to go back and do some of those practices, I'm sure it would be very, very strenuous, and I just wasn't enjoying it. My friends were starting to get ready for football for our sophomore year. So I was like, I'll just get ahead and start getting ready to do football stuff. So I just stopped showing up for a couple of days. And I remember Coach Damas came out to the common area to find me and grabbed me and asked me what the heck I was doing and told me to get back to the wrestling room. So I got back.
That's cool. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind there is fall down 7 times, stand up 8. And it's one of those things, it's hard to get your ass kicked every day.
Yeah.
And it's not something that really any of us would volunteer to do. But there's lessons learned in that.
Man, just to expound on that, I feel like that's the best skill that wrestling ended up teaching me for CrossFit. Because within CrossFit, because there's so many modalities, everyone always talks one of the things Justin does better than any of the maybe other champions, and doing it better is a weird way of saying perhaps, but he doesn't win a ton of events, right? But he's just very consistent. And if you come into CrossFit with the mentality that every time you don't win a workout that you're a loser, it's a counterproductive mindset. You're going to lose more often than not if your standard of winning and losing is so micro focused on like the individual event. You have to have kind of a macro approach of like, did this loss bring me closer to becoming a better CrossFitter, which in turn is going to help me win more. And so I kind of was force fed that lesson my freshman year of high school. My sophomore year, my drilling partner was a guy who ended up placing at state, which for our school was a big deal, Alex Wirtz. And then I started wrestling off-season practices with guys from the area who were all very good and college guys and everything. And so I just got beat all the time in my high school years. And then you go to college, and then, I show up there, and our team captain at the time, Jimmy Rafferty's beating me up. We're at the same weight class, and I get beat up for a couple of years by a succession of guys in college. And then, that's how I developed the skills there. And then I applied those same lessons towards CrossFit, where once I graduated and headed down to Georgia, I went to train with Kurt Gibson and Travis Mayer and the best guys in the area, Hepner, all these guys who were way better than me, and they beat me up, and I got better. But if I had just stopped at the reaction that I had to losing to those guys, of like, man, it sucks to lose. I don't want this feeling. I'm going to find a space where I can stay comfortable. Then I don't think I would have been able to, develop into the athlete I've been able to develop into. Like losing is such an important part of the process. There's so many more lessons that are learned when you are faced with difficulty than the lessons that you can learn when things seem to be going well. For
sure. It sounds like you have a really healthy relationship with the societal perception of the word failure. It's not true failure to you. It's just a data point. Mm-hmm. And you would just continued mastering the mundane, collecting data points along the way. And over time, what did that do? It sharpened your sword. It added tools to your toolbox. And inevitably, like, consistency is such a cliche word. You throw it out there and it's like, yeah, just be consistent. Inevitably, you'll be successful. It sounds easy.
Trident Coffee is sponsoring this episode of the Invictus Mindset Podcast. My guys over at Trident taught me something really important this last year. That we are all a bundle of stories, both good and bad, and everything in between. At Trident, they're storytellers. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. They help create connections through symbology and storytelling that engage their customers on an emotional level, and this distinguishes them from other coffee brands. You can find Trident in Imperial Beach and in Coronado. They offer over 14 plus nitro cold brews along with dairy-free options. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from their keto bakery. All these options will allow you to support your health and fitness journey with Trident Coffee. They're more than just a coffee company. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code Invictus20 for 20% off online and in tap rooms. Once again, that's tridentcoffee.com. Use code Invictus20 for 20% off online and in tap rooms. Take your coffee experience to the next level. Two important factors for us over at Invictus Mindset are true care and attention to detail. My friends over at RX Smart Gear have been bringing innovative fitness tools to the market since 2009. From their award-winning Evo speed ropes, to their amazing gymnastics grips, to their line of inflatable fitness equipment, they're constantly looking to problem solve within the fitness industry. They're always allowing us to have our gear work for us rather than against us. Hop on over to RX Smart Gear and use discount code Invictus Mindset to shop their latest cutting edge gear. Have your gear work with you and not against you.
Consistency's fucking hard. Especially when you're getting your butt kicked every single day. And, you were a part of the Army for quite some time and played different roles in that arena, and then eventually landed yourself on the Warrior Fitness team. What was your experience like in the Army? And then how was it when you got to take part in a pretty cool gig that kind of, in my humble opinion, maybe led you towards CrossFit?
Yeah, so I'd actually been able to compete on and off. Like after I graduated college, my goal, I had developed a 10-year plan in 2012 that said I want to make the games in 2022, which is ironic because that's the only year out of the last 5 I haven't made it. But so I set out this 10-year plan. I finished wrestling in 2015, and I started competing. I went to regionals in 2016 and was competing around training and doing my regular Army job for most of 2017, 18, 19, but 17 had the finger incident. 18, we were in Eastern Europe, and things were just like not super consistent training wise. So I was very fortunate that the Army and the United States Army Recruiting Command was developing an effort to try and recruit more healthy military age females and males in our target demographic. And CrossFit kind of was a good way of, or functional fitness was a good way of marketing towards those people. Very much a right time and right place gig, but I was able to combine what I learned in the Army about balancing time and managing people with what I wanted to do, which was become a professional, CrossFit athlete. So it was the perfect transition standpoint. It was half of an Army gig, which is what I'd been doing previously, and half of what I am doing now, which is being a professional athlete. And I really can't have imagined like a smoother way to transition from being a full-time soldier to being a full-time athlete.
It also gives you a really unique understanding of how people that pursue the CrossFit Games and have a full-time job or go to school or manage other balls in the air, it gives you that empathy and that compassion. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, the sport's evolved so much where, let's say, probably the top 15 to 20 on both the male and female side might be full-time athletes. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of the field is probably balancing a few other things. What are your thoughts on that in the world of CrossFit as we see it now, and how that was the case for you early on, and then now you've transitioned into more of a full-time athlete role?
It gives me a lot of respect, and I think everyone has a level of respect for the Colton Mertens, people out there who are doing a job and putting all their time and energy into the job and into the CrossFit, but it is so hard. Mm-hmm. In 2019, the first year I qualified for the games, I was still working primarily just as a normal Army captain and then also training for CrossFit. And I did nothing else outside of it. I did not have a good time, like mentally. It was probably a lot more stressful than I've met. It was more stressful than the subsequent years by a long shot. And people know how hard it is in abstract, but having done it, it's crazy hard. The sport is always getting better. It's new enough where you can still do that. Like you couldn't decide to play in the NBA while
of course,
working a regular management job.
There's levels to the game for sure.
Levels to the game, but as CrossFit, I'd say probably every 4 to 5 years the level has seemed to jump, like to where maybe more than half the guys from 2010 couldn't compete in the 2014 field, 14 to 18, 18 to 22, so on and so forth. And the people who have managed to stay competitive as these level jumps have occurred, while also splitting their time with something else, it's so much harder than people think. And people know CrossFit is hard, like it is. It's what is at the core of what we do. You're going to finish a CrossFit workout in some sort of physical distress that you probably wouldn't if you're training at a local big box gym or doing yoga or some other form of physical activity. Mm-hmm. But it is way harder than you probably even think. So.
Totally. It's hard to balance a lot of it. And the champion of the North America semifinal, or the Western side of the North American semifinal, Pat Vellner, works as a doctor of chiropractic care twice a week. He's a dad. And when I chat with him, he's like, yeah, sometimes I train at 6 a.m., sometimes I train at 10 p.m. Like the way he fits it in is unreal. A part of me jokes with him and thinks that he fits his training in around the sun so he doesn't get sunburn.
Yeah, that's probably likely.
I mean, he gets sunburn opening the refrigerator.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, some of these people that are making it work, you think about Val Volbrel back in the day, being a mom, still operating in the world of being a teacher, and then her consecutive games appearances. Huge shout out to the people that are making it work, man. It's definitely not easy. You mentioned your first year, 2019, where you made the CrossFit Games, and that was, I believe, was that the sanctional model?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that? The sanctional model versus kind of what it's come back to now, which is, I guess you would categorize it as a regional model, or now it's a semifinal model?
I think the sanctional model was the one that probably benefited athletes in my particular. It benefited me the most, and I'm aware that probably does not extend to all athletes. Guys who are better than me maybe didn't like it as much. Guys who maybe aren't as good didn't. Everyone is going to see things from their point of view. But that was the model I probably appreciated the most, and especially after last year, when I was sick for a semifinals event, and my whole season's gone after that. For the sanctionals, you had multiple opportunities. It actually valued the open, and I think the open and quarterfinals are pretty dramatically undervalued right now because they're the only actual true world competitions. So we have this worldwide ranking model that assigns spots, and there also are like the given spots based off of open participation and everything. But it's a self-serving model in some ways because all these regions are guaranteed to send athletes to the game. So even if those athletes, if they finished 300th or something in the open and 300th in the world quarterfinals, the data will tell you then that there is probably X amount of people in North America who are better than those athletes who are going to make it from those regions, but their ranking is going to say that they are better because they were able to make it to the games. But the only reason they're able to make it to the games is because, they have these assigned spots. So every model is going to have holes in it and everything, but I think the sanctional model gave athletes multiple chances to compete, and it also ended up helping athletes have more of an ability to make a living wage out of this, because the competitions were incentivized to put on an event that was going to attract good athletes. And the easiest way to do that is, with increased prize purses versus now, even though the games does pay out better, they pay out all of their athletes now who qualify for the games, which is a welcome step forward. But if you just competed in CrossFit events for the year, I think there's maybe like $10,000 for winning the Open. There's no money for doing anything in quarterfinals, and I think it's $5,000 for winning semifinals. So up until from January to August, the most money you can make is $15,000 if you win the Open and if you win.
Yeah, and nobody can survive on $15,000 a year, which is super tough. I think the sanctional model was maybe the closest to like the tennis tour, maybe very similar to the PGA tour in golf. I've heard it mentioned a few times that it's relatable to like the X Games in some ways. And I mean, these are athletes that are now doing the sport full time. But once again, even in those sports, only the top 20 really do, have the ability to perform full time.
This episode is brought to you by HVMN, Health via Modern Nutrition. They launched the world's first ketone drink in 2017. And then in 2022, launched the version 2 of their exogenous ketone product line called Ketone IQ. I found that incorporating ketones into my morning routine increased my daily focus and energy. The beauty of this product is that you can stack it. It doesn't even have to replace your morning routine. My morning routine looks like taking the dog on a walk, hitting my daily shot of Ketone IQ, hopping in the cold plunge, and then finishing it off with a nice Trident coffee while I soak up some morning sunlight. Try out some ketones for yourself by using the code Invictus for 20% off Ketone IQ. Ketones are a super efficient fuel for your brain that leaves you feeling energized and clear-headed. Give it a shot. I promise you won't regret it. Once again, use code Invictus for 20% off Ketone IQ. Move fast and break shit. This is one of the core values at LSKD and something that we fully resonate with here at the Invictus Mindset Podcast. LSKD develops functional sportswear with a streetwear aesthetic that's on a mission to inspire you to chase the vibe through sport, fitness, and adventure. Through my experiences with LSKD products and their team members, I have found a brand that I can call home that keeps me performing at my highest level through fitness and business. I train daily in the rep shorts and love the versatility they offer, so I can go from training at the gym directly to meetings, client consults, running errands, or preparing for podcasts. The LSKB vibe has finally reached San Diego, and we want you to experience it too. Go to us.lskd.co to start shopping today. We want to inspire you to chase the vibe.
And so what are your thoughts as to like where CrossFit is now and where it could be so that athletes can do this full time and monetize their world, more so as athletes and not as much as influencers?
Yeah, I think that would require a different season structure than the one we have right now. So I just don't know if it's fully compatible with what we've got going. The off-season events end up bringing just as many eyes. You go to Wadapalooza, you'll have more fans there than you will for pretty much any other event, although Pasadena was sold out this last weekend. But Wadapalooza is always packed. Rogue has always got a ton of people. If there's a way of integrating competitions like that into the CrossFit Games season structure in a way that didn't take away from the games being the marquee event. I think that you could package the events to some outside organization, like some media organization.
Loud and Live maybe, or somebody like that.
Yeah. Or even like, I'm thinking even bigger, like the way Rogue sells their event and packages it to CBS Sports, right? Like by doing that, the prices for, advertising, they can charge more for advertising, and then the athletes can get paid more. When you pay more athletes a livable or professional athlete wage, the quality of the sport goes up, because we'll have more people who are able to train.
I was going to say, if you monetize it like that, you're probably getting guys that are like, maybe guys that didn't make it in the NFL, maybe a few guys that, didn't make it in some of these prime sports coming over to play. Mm-hmm. And now the athleticism is extremely high. And then you get to see, like everybody says, if you get those athletes, some of the current athletes won't make it. It's like, I don't know if that's true. The work ethic, like there's a lot of different angles as to, you and I have talked about it briefly, like what is athleticism? Yeah. And it's such a conversation that ends up going in circles depending on who you ask. But it is interesting to see the growth and development of the sport. And I mean, with your relationship with Bijan and some of the other managers and agents within the space that understand, pro sports. I mean, he works with Tim Hardaway Jr., and it's just fun to have these conversations because it shows that the conversation is elevating, that the sport is moving in the right direction where, you're still part of that legacy, that foundational legacy that's building this sport that maybe 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you pause, you self-reflect, you're like, man, I helped lay the groundwork for the growth and development of that. And you get to see future athletes really monetizing their life on it. It'd be a pretty cool story.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. Different sports respond to growth differently. And I know because CrossFit has kind of this grassroots and, garage gym type of like early mentality that was kind of pervasive early on. I think there's a lot of reticence among the CrossFit community to partner with larger brands and groups. But I feel like if people took a more long-term approach, they'd recognize that these things can happen. They don't necessarily have to be harbingers of, compromise, like to the CrossFit ethos. But if you want to expand outside of your, of our current demographic, you have to do things that reach into other spaces. And I think it's reminiscent of kind of something I felt like we saw a lot of in the Army with recruiting. We'd make ads and things that we thought were cool within the Army without necessarily always thinking about how people outside of the Army would feel about it. But when it's Army people, validating if this is a good idea or not, like we all think similarly, we have similar experiences and similar like backgrounds and worldviews and everything, but we're not marketing to ourselves. Yeah. And it's the same thing with CrossFit. We're not marketing to people within CrossFit. We know like how to, broadly speaking, we know how to eat, how to train, all these things. And if we're working with a company, if you're working with Twinkies or something like that, tracking that's maybe not something that's fully in line with like the CrossFit ideology, but the people who are eating Twinkies may not have any. This might be the only way that this information gets communicated to them. So if you're wanting, and there's probably a lot more people who eat Twinkies than there are people who do CrossFit. Yep. So if you want your brand and your space to grow, you have to work outside of brands that are already in line with how you think.
Yeah, it's truly shifting lenses, shifting perspective. And that's one of the things that makes you incredibly valuable. You don't just look at scenarios from Chandler Smith's point of view. You look at it from my point of view, his point of view, a bird's eye point of view, Jesse's point of view. And I think getting that 360 view allows different perspective, different conversations to come to the table. If you and I agree on every single thing, it's a pretty boring conversation. Yeah, absolutely. And so I think it's fun playing ping pong. I mean, the last couple of years, we saw Monster enter the conversation, which was incredibly confrontational at first. But you look at, I think the first title sponsor of CrossFit was Panda Express. Yeah, I think in the NBA, we've seen McDonald's, we've seen Sprite, we've seen all kinds of things, which, we know is probably not the best for the health of certain people, but it could be when used appropriately. I know Floyd Mayweather talks highly of Coca-Cola and how that helped him recover a little bit with regards to glycogen and all that stuff. But where I'd like to go with the conversation next, Chandler, is like when you're in wrestling, you got to cut. You got a lot of challenges with food and sauna therapy and wearing different sweatsuits and things. Like, how did that affect you, and how has that affected your relationship with food now?
Wow, it's so funny that you bring that up. So my brother has a title fight. He's an amateur MMA fighter, and he has it coming up this weekend, and he sent me a picture as we were coming in of, hey, he's like, I'm doing your favorite activity. I loved cutting weight. I thought cutting weight was awesome.
Wow. He said nobody ever.
It's so nice, man. It's like there's so much objectivity. You must reach this weight. And then like, however you get to that endpoint, obviously there's things you can't do that are against the rules. And so you can't do that. But like, it's very much get from point A, your weight is this, to point B. How you do it, none of this matters. You just have to get here.
You got this little smirk on your face, like you gamified it a little bit.
I loved cutting weight, man. But it did bring a pretty unhealthy relationship with food. And Jesse and I were also talking about this in the car. And like people normally, colloquially speaking, eating disorders, I think are only, people mainly think of them as like depriving yourself of food. But you can also have eating disorder on the flip side of eating too much, right? And I think sometimes wrestlers have a tendency to fall into that because there is so much deprivation. I swore that I would never diet again after I was done wrestling in college. And I think my body composition suffered for a few years because I was just aggressively eating whatever I wanted to, like out of spite towards all the time spent cutting weight.
What was your go-to? What was like your favorite cheat?
Oh man, Pez. So with cutting weight, like on the week of, you need to have enough carbs for energy to, do all the activities that you're supposed to do, but you want to like reduce the weight of food inside of you. And also you don't want to have stuff that's going to help you hold on to weight. So you take the salts out, you try to bring the carbs down a little bit, maybe throw a little bit more fiber. So eating a lot of apples and, stuff like that, but it's not necessarily eating, just vegetables all the time. That's losing weight. But for cutting weight, you can do silly things like eat Pez for lunch and dinner, or whatever candy it is that you want. I think I developed a super bad sweet tooth based off of that. And I was like, I can totally justify this. I'm getting 1,000 calories by eating these bags of candy, but they only weigh 6.5 ounces or something like that. So you do have the energy to get through a practice then, but then you're not necessarily building great habits all the time. But yeah, it's cool. I think the objectivity of, I feel like I always do best in competitions for CrossFit where the problem set is kind of clearly defined. And what I mean by that is for the games, I think the games is the toughest test to plan for because they can throw anything at you, right? The capacity of the athletes at its highest, they have availability, they can do pegboards and, swim in a pool and all these other things. Like for a semifinal, broadly speaking, that you're going to do X, Y, Z. For Wadapalooza, you're going to swim. For Rogue, there's a couple other things like,
strongman.
More or less, yeah, more or less what's coming your way. And so that's my favorite part. I've like always played a role in helping develop my training. And part of the reason I do this because I think I identify these patterns and trends well. And I know that comes from wrestling when not only are you doing that with how you're cutting your weight, but also when you're scouting your opponent. You just try. Sports are inherently this open-ended problem where you never know what your opponent is going to do, but everyone has tendencies. So if you can lock down tendencies, and I think the same type of planning also kind of extends to Army stuff. Like you might not know how a hypothetical force would react in this scenario, but if you know their SOP and like what their general react to contact or blah 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 is, you can pretty much predict it. And even if the predictions don't come out to be exactly right, by having done that work planning, you put yourself in a position to be able to react faster than your opponents, and giving yourself more time in CrossFit allows for more relevant training. In life allows for, you to just get ahead of the power curve. And if I'm trying to set up a training scenario for next year and I'm already thinking about that and other people aren't, like it just puts you ahead of your competition in any way, shape, or form that you can think of.
That was a really cool lens into how the wheels turn a little bit. We got to hear a few different terms that you threw out: SOP, standard operating procedures. It's cool to know that you pick up on trends. You're paying attention to pattern recognition. You talked about scouting an opponent, right? Super important in the world of sport to see tendencies and see certain habits when things get challenging for certain individuals. And we have a mutual friend that loves to say, all problems are solvable.
All problems are solvable.
And we got to see a little bit into your lenses as to, how the military helped shape and groom your mindset a little bit. How have you found the ability to consistently plan, right? Like failing to plan is planning to fail.
Very true.
Right? And, taking care of your gear, it leads to your gear taking care of you.
Oh my gosh, man.
Right? You have two ways to do things, right? And again, There's a few different statements that I've heard you say over the last few months that I've picked up on. I'm like, man, I'm taking that one with me. That one's a special one. And honestly, my dad was a Navy guy, not a West Point guy. And, he used to say a lot of these things too. And so how do these things kind of serve you? Are they mantras? Are they things that go into your day to day? Are they now categorized as unconscious competence, or you just do them naturally? What are your thoughts on some of these little statements that you utilize on the day to day?
LMNT, pronounced element, is a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything you need and nothing you don't. That means a science-backed electrolyte ratio with none of the junk. No sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, and most importantly, no BS. Whether it's after a long workout, hot yoga, or an intense sauna and ice session, I've been using Element to keep me hydrated and replenishing all of my lost electrolytes. So many of us wake up chronically fatigued, and the antidote to this is salt water. Salt has previously been blamed for blood pressure issues, but new research shows that replenishing salt and electrolytes can lead to more energy, no headaches, a clear mind, and enhanced focus. Use the link drinklmnt.com/invictusmindset to make any purchase of Element, and you will receive a free sample pack with all of the Element flavors. Once again, that's drinklmnt.com/invictusmindset.
The platitudes actually are, I think, even though they sound goofy and stuff, they do reflect how I go about things. So every part of my schedule, there's a time every day where I'm going over what the plan was for the last week and the plan for today, and then the plan going forwards. We have these training meetings all the time in the Army, and you're trying to stay awake through them most of the time. But during these meetings, right, what you're doing that exact process. You're saying like, how can we iterate better going forwards? Do we have a successful time the last time we did this thing? And even if it's something you've discussed previously, new ideas might have come around. You have to give yourself time to think. And it's I think that's something I still very intentionally do. It's weird to say that I'm spending time thinking about how I'm thinking, but you also have to be able to pull yourself out of like, why am I thinking? You have to be able to ask yourself, why am I thinking like this? And then recognize that there's also gaps. There might be gaps in how you're thinking about things. So you're thinking about how you're thinking. I
think you verbalize that very well. I think thinking is a very unique skill that's not practiced anymore. Everybody wants either an altered state of consciousness or they want distraction. They want dopamine. They want to play. Oh, I'm uncomfortable right now. I'm with my thoughts. Let me just jump to the phone, right? Or I'm going to go do this other thing. And I think spending time thinking and then striving to fill the gaps within your thinking and then maybe deconstructing some of your biases is a very healthy approach. And it's one of the things that I think makes you humbly very unique. And when you look at the world of high performers, they realize they have biases. So what do? They have people around them that call them out on their bullshit.
Dude, that's the number one thing. My best friend Vic, and we talk about this all the time. Like the thing that I value the most with him, and also that I end up valuing the most with training partners, and Bickle and I have also brought this up a lot, is honesty. And I think within the CrossFit space, sometimes you can get away, especially someone who like more or less like ends up programming a lot of stuff for myself. I can get away from being exposed to things that I'm bad at. One, because I'm halfway decent at this, but also because I know what my strengths and weaknesses are, and I'm also designing what I'm doing. So if I say I don't want to do wall balls and thrusters, I can set up my training to hide the fact that I'm not as proficient in those movements as I am in others. But I could, if I have people around me who are going to say, hey man, you're not doing this thing correctly, or they're good enough to really put me in the dirt when we do those, a la Sam, then I can't end up hiding from these things. But if we are able to exchange that honestly about things, then I'm not going to ever have that as an actual option, right? I'm always going to get exposed or get called out whenever I try to run behind something that I'm afraid of, like how much it's going to challenge me. So having a good group around you is so awesome. Kind of like you just mentioned there. And that's a really good thing about being out here at Invictus. We got guys between Josh and Jorge, what they're capable of. Those guys are very, very fit on the fitness side. We have people who are awesome gymnasts. We have people who are awesome machine folks. There's nowhere to hide. And I could use that information to be like, all right, I'm not going to do this workout with Bryce. If there's wall balls, I know he's better than me at wall balls. I'm just going to avoid him for wall balls. Or if I have a group of people around me who are, we have this exchange where they'll be like, hey man, I know you're ducking me on this. Come over here and do these wall balls. Come get this work. Then
it's fun because it's like in the world of CrossFit, everybody's nice to each other, which is different to other sports. It's fun to get like a little bit of a shit talking component.
Yeah.
But then simultaneously it's authentic. It shows that people actually care because it's pulling the best version of you out.
Exactly.
That maybe is trying to like hide under the covers a little bit, and inevitably you're going to get exposed. And I think I like the term gas. I call it give a shit.
Okay.
And it's like when you get smashed in a workout, if you actually care about the craft, you leave a little frustrated that day.
You should.
And you're like, I don't like the way that felt. And I'm going to get back to the drawing board, enhance my preparation so I never feel that again.
It's kind of like what we were talking about with old Lukey's comments about all problems are solvable. You can tell yourself that. Even last year, right? Like I know I've had asthma for my entire life. I've had attacks before at events, but it was never high stakes enough or it didn't cost me enough to force me to make a change. And then after last year, I'm like, oh shoot, this is something that could potentially end my whole career. It's not something I'm going to be able to fix, but I can plan around it. So I developed all these things to try to work around, keeping me from showing up to an event and having that happen again. And you can't control for everything, but if you spent enough time being dedicated to trying to figure out how to solve this problem, or you care enough whenever you've experienced that negative emotion to say, hey, I want to change this and I'm going to do everything I can. Like you've maximized your ability, you filled up your talent capsule, and you can't be asked to give any more than that. Like, because at some level, even if I had trained my entire life, I was probably never going to be Michael Jordan. I'm a hard 5'7" 3/4", right? Like it's just not going to happen. Everyone has that same cap in some other areas, but if you've truly done everything you can and you end every day saying like, I gave a games level performance for training today, I gave a world-class performance for how I prepared for this podcast and how I executed the questions, everything, you can't ask any more of yourself.
No way. It goes back to that statement of full effort, full victory. We use that often in Invictus. You used it as an Instagram caption the other day. It's something that I think gives you that famous John Wooden definition of success, which is peace of mind, knowing that you did your best to be the best that you're capable of becoming.
Yeah.
And there's absolute magic in that. And you gently hinted at the asthma. And that's very publicly documented via Buttery Bros documentary In the Arena. And you shared extreme vulnerability there. I mean, huge kudos to you and courage. It was a time and a place where you were on the up and coming in the space. Your name started to get tossed around a lot. People saw your potential. They saw a lot going on. What was that experience like? I mean, you've overcome so much adversity since I've known you, but that was before, we fostered our relationship. Now looking back to that experience, was that necessary for your growth and development? Was it something that, maybe you put below the equator in the Chandler Smith story where you're like, it was necessary, but I never want to have that experience again? How would you kind of categorize In the Arena?
I think it was, first off, I did not want, as it was happening, I was very much against that story getting shared. And the guy who did it, Evan Borsier, he's an awesome dude, and he did a great job of capturing things. And I was like, I really don't think we should release this. I want people to think I'm making excuses and everything, but I feel like it's fostered a lot of healthy conversations with people who got to see it, but also with me in regards to maybe how I view what happened there and what's happened in previous times. There's a lot of similarities. I've been competing since 2016, and I think I mentioned earlier, 17, my season after the first day of the Open season was over because I chopped off part of my finger. And 18, we were doing stuff in Eastern Europe, so I couldn't really train then, and you lost season then. So I've lost a good amount of seasons in the space since 2016. That's 3 seasons where things not fully within my control kept me from feeling like I maximized my potential there. But the only way that I choose to view those things is that they've incited some sort of change in how I do things that have made me better going forward. So there's no part of me that views those things occurring as negatives or things that I wish didn't happen, because they all force me to change some part of how I train or how I go about viewing my day-to-day life or just life in general. And it's all made me better. And if I allowed myself to think for a half second that they took something away from me, I think you spiral into this circle of, feeling
victim mentality, I've never seen that from you. And it's cool to see, I mean, you're human, right? So you may dabble there occasionally, like all of us, but like you've always responded so well to adversity. And it's pretty freaking cool.
I don't think I have, but I'm always lucky where I think that's probably something I've got a lot from mentors. And I think one of the things that we did a very good job of in Boston with CompTrain Ben is so big on avoiding that victim mentality. And it's an intentional way of thinking that maybe goes against some of the ways of how I want to think. I think I'm a pretty negative person at base, but you can choose to view, if you tell yourself over and over again, like this is making me a better competitor, or I'm excited to see how I respond to this challenge, or things like that, eventually you actually do start to believe it. And that'll change how that has changed how I view all of these things. Right. So, the initial reaction is probably, oh shoot, why this happened to me, all that stuff. But over time, I think I've trained myself to be able to view these setbacks as things that are just going to help me. As an example, this weekend I had a no rep on one of the rope climbs that I was like, and I just like laughed and I was like, man, can I still put up a good score for this? And I know people will be like, you're just brainwashing yourself. And maybe, from one point of view you are, but in that moment, I genuinely, that was like my first thought. And I was like, afterwards, I was like, oh, it's cool that I was able to shift that. And I still had a pity party afterwards. Like, man, I didn't reach the goal that I wanted to for this workout. But the fact that my response in the workout was, can I still do this thing? Like, all right, he's going to make this harder for me, but I got excited about it. That was maybe one of the biggest successes of the weekend, because it shows that the training that I've done for my mind is actually what I go to first now. It's not, something that I have to, or at least in that case, it's not something that I had to tell myself. It was just my response.
It's also, you've refined your skills. So when obstacles get in your way, you're like, over, under, around. I can clearly do that, which is very cool. And I don't know, man, I've observed you, and it's very cool to see, like, that word adversity just keeps coming to mind. Like, it's never easy, but it's always worth it. And it's fun to chat about on the other side of that. And you've mentioned a few times, 2017, getting your finger chopped off, the finger incident. What was that experience like? I mean, most people don't know that about you. It makes gripping things significantly harder. It's not like, sometimes, I mean, I think we see the guy in the NFL that like blew up his hand from fireworks.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have to grab really anything. I mean, I guess in some capacities, but he tapes it up and he's still a borderline Pro Bowler, still kicking ass out there. And in your case, obviously, you need to grip things. You need to front rack things. You need to grab onto pull-up bars. You need to do rope climbs. How did that experience take place, and how does it affect you now?
We were messing around with, we were cleaning up our tanks. Long story short, we were cleaning up our tanks. I got involved in a way that I shouldn't have, and tanks are heavy. Pieces of tanks are heavy. Fell down, lost a piece of the finger. It was a bummer. I was having a very good year. I felt like that was the first year I was kind of leaning into training like a professional CrossFitter at the time, or at least from what I knew. We won Wadapalooza team of 3 that year, beat a bunch of really good guys. I felt like I had what it took to make the games that year. And so I was extremely bummed in the moment. And I also was, worried for all those reasons you mentioned. Like, your hands are very, very important for CrossFit. But it made me lean into a lot of other things that actually ended up establishing a base that to this day I think I'm able to call upon. As in, I got more into my strength and conditioning side of things because I was unable to do any meaningful gymnastics work for a while. I broke the bones in this finger as well when it happened, and just this hand was pretty useless. So I was like, all right, we're going to get really strong, learn about conditioning. I ended up linking up with Matt Whipke, who's a coach I still work for today, with conditioning stuff. In between that, I got really strong and very conditioned, and I think those are probably my main calling cards as an athlete to this day. So it ended up working really well, and I also learned how to more intelligently train around this hand, but also exercises that were going to help me with the movements that I was going to struggle with. And everyone in the space is always, you're dealing with some sort of injury or everything like that, but the attitude I learned from that, like when I broke this hand earlier this year, I was like, okay, this has happened before. I know how to work around this. And everyone's had injuries again, but like I had surgery for a hernia that I had 5 weeks before Rogue.
Was that this year or was that?
That was this last fall.
Oh, wow. How'd you get the hernia?
Just training. Yeah, I was there for a while. I thought they were like, it's not a hernia. You just tore a muscle or something.
What does that surgery entail? I'm not super familiar with it.
You go under, and then they put a little mesh deal in your belly so that way the muscle can grow back and connect over the top of it, and then it keeps your guts from falling out because that's what's kind of going on.
That's brutal. So you can't really brace a ton through that recovery.
I can now, but yeah, through the recovery, I didn't lift a weight until Rogue, and I don't think I'd lifted anything heavier than 225 until we got there. And I was like, we did the axle logs, but like for a straight up barbell, just nothing. It was kind of helping.
That's unbelievable to me. What did training look like right before that? Just a lot of cardiovascular activity?
A lot of cardio stuff, pretty similar to like what I was doing with this, right? Like, you train a lot of cardio. You just train what you can train. And I've always I think there is a way to train around everything. And as long as that's the story that you're telling yourself, you're going to actually believe it. It's that same like self-brainwashing process of that we were kind of talking about earlier with no matter what the injury is, there's a story you can tell yourself that's going to tell you that it's going to make you better. And there's a story that you can tell yourself that's saying that you're missing out on X, Y, and Z and you're getting worse. But if you're very intentional about making sure the story that you tell yourself is a good one, you're going to come out of that situation with at least more knowledge and potentially more fitness as well.
For sure. And you mentioned to me previously, you can focus on what you can or you can think about what you can't. And as you were navigating the broken hand, you did some really innovative things. The blood flow restriction was cool.
Yeah.
You found ways to integrate different forms of grip work, which I thought was really cool. And not just farmer carries and bar hangs, but rope stuff, hex holds, different types of pinch grip type stuff. You did a lot of hand over hand rope pulls with the blood flow restriction, different types of muscle contractions. How'd you get the wheels spinning? Did you start Googling things? Did you reach out to friends within your circle? Like you were just tinkering in the lab and it was really fun to see.
I'm very big on deferring to experts, and kind of like we were mentioning, there's a lot of people who are physical experts with movements and stuff in our space, like our specific space in San Diego here at Invictus, but there's also experts. I talked to Kyle Ruth from Training Think Tank. He's the one who put me onto the BFR setup. I talked to my conditioning coach about ways to work on conditioning outside of it. There's so many people who've already encountered these problem sets. There's nothing really new under the sun. So you can ask other people. Will Morad actually had broke his hand before last year's games. He doesn't tell anybody that, but he broke his hand for last year's games and he still ended up doing pretty well. So there's these things that already kind of been built out. And if you've established the relationships with people to where you can, ask these questions and they know that you respect their opinion and that you have a good enough relationship to get with the information that you need from them. I think, again, all problems are solvable. There's always a way. Someone's always done whatever it is you're trying to do. And I'm lucky that I've been around the space and developed enough good connections with enough intelligent people to help me kind of get through this problem. And I'm confident anytime I have something come up, I'm confident I can get through it because the people that I've surrounded myself with have always helped me get through these things before. And I am certain that for whatever, problem I run into, if there is a way that it can be solved, I have the people within my space that can help me get that job done.
I mean, as a history buff, if I look back at the Chandler Smith history, I mean, last weekend you humbly hit a 295 snatch on the hand / wrist, and you made it through quarterfinals, which was a very challenging weekend. It seems like Heber and Mars, the Buttery Bros, are always around when you're navigating adversity.
Or I'm always just navigating adversity.
That too. And, what was quarterfinals like? That was a very challenging weekend. First and foremost, how did you break the hand? And then how did you figure out how to move a barbell and do some of these gymnastics things? That was, I don't know, man. Like I watched you do it and I was just like, I don't know if I could smile because it was so heroic or if I could cry or I could laugh. It was just like watching a man go to war and just surrender to whatever was in here. I think the physical attributes at that moment, like you're just like, hey, I'm going to trust my training. I'm going to trust in me and the lifetime reps that I put in up until this moment. The love and support of your wife, Jessie Smith, co-piloting you on every single workout. It was an experience, man. And to be a part of that and observe that and just see you do your craft, man.
It's funny too, because I feel like you actually were a big part of making that happen. Like by having people there, you guys all stayed. We were there all night, doing workouts. But the fact that you took your time.
Also, though, we wanted to be there. right? There's a difference between, I got to stay there for this competitive athlete. Like there's a difference between that and yes, fuck whatever else going on. I want to be there. We're going to help him maximize his human potential in this moment.
Well, you guys did do that. I think I've always, like I mentioned earlier too, like I don't work well in isolation. I love being a part of a team, being part of something bigger than myself. And at that moment, I felt like I was just we all had a part to play in helping that happen. And that was my part to play, was just to do the exercises. But I feel it can get glamorized a little bit with sports because of the physicality of it. But, there's women out there who have children, are back to work less than, 2 weeks later, right? And like physically, that's way harder than working off of a broken hand. But more or less what it comes down to is if this is my job, everyone has a job, and a job is pretty much a prerequisite for continued participation in society. You really don't have a choice besides doing whatever it takes to get that job done. So even if it is physically uncomfortable, if it hurts, all of that, these are things that people across the board put their self-interest and self-preservation to the side in the interest of being able to continue to participate in their job, because they recognize the effects that has on the people surrounding them, right? Like their kids won't have a roof over their head if they don't wake up early to go to work, or whatever their thing is. So I really was just doing my job. I knew it was going to hurt, but everything, CrossFit hurts at baseline. And as long as you're not making things worse, it's a good trade. And it still hurt. It hurt a bunch this weekend, snatching everything.
What's the famous saying? You can suffer with pain, or you can suffer with the pain of regret.
Pain of regret, yeah.
And it's cool that you were willing to endure the pain in order to do your job.
I think that's what the practice of CrossFit, if you look at like a day-to-day basis of what we're doing, that's one of the biggest takeaways that you can apply the rest of your life. That if you put yourself in uncomfortable situations for a short term, it's going to make your long-term situation more comfortable. Mm-hmm. And we're all doing that. We're all making that trade every time we show up to a gym. It was an extension of that same trade that we all make when we decide, I'm going to do this workout. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to help me get closer to the body type I want, or the performance results I want, or so on and so forth. And yeah, just do what you got to do.
Short-term discomfort for long-term benefit, or, some of the business people out there like to talk about delayed gratification being one of the number one sources of success.
This episode is brought to you by Mush. My friends over at Mush created an incredibly cool product of ready-to-eat overnight oats. And for those of you that listen to the podcast often, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And Mush has done just that, as their products have no more than 7 clean ingredients that are dairy-free, gluten-free, with no added sugar. Mush started right here at Invictus, as they had a vision to create convenient, healthy, and clean nutrition. And this landed them on Shark Tank, where the famous Mark Cuban invested in them. Now they're found in retailers all over the country, including Costco, Sprouts, Target, and Whole Foods. Check out my friends over at www.eatmush.com.
And going back down memory lane a little bit, what was your childhood like? Your father played professional football, and you got to experience being the son of a professional athlete. What was that process like in your childhood?
I think it set the stage for learning a lot about treating, your physical performance as a job, right? Mm-hmm. And so even when I was in the Army, or when I was at school wrestling and everything like that, I had seen enough iterations, because not only did my dad play, he's been a coach in the NFL as a strength conditioning coach for the last 20-something years. So I've seen a lot of high-level professional athletes, apply their trade and apply their skills, and I've seen how they live their lives in the gym and outside of the gym, to where I think all behavior is learned at some level. And I've seen good models. So that's, even though I have the examples where I was able to see losing is helping me in this way or something like that, I still probably learned all of that from watching, people who were pros who were modeling that lesson before me. So it gave me a lot of good examples to follow, bad ones too. And I think you learn just as much from both of those, and maybe some free repetitions on how to what it means to be a professional athlete.
In the words of you, I'm tracking.
Yeah.
You've done a really cool job of surrounding yourself with some pretty special people. This last weekend, we got to cross paths with Noah Olson, who flew across the country to come support you.
Sick.
Such an awesome dude. My first time meeting him, and I've heard nothing but great things, and he lived up to every single compliment that people have ever made. You've crossed paths with Travis Mayer. You mentioned Will Morad, just to name a few. And you've been on a team with some of these guys at Wodapalooza and had some really high-level success. What does it mean to you to have these deep, intimate relationships that where like somebody's willing to fly all the way across the country to come support you? That's dope, dude.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. That's one of the coolest things. I think my parents have only seen me compete a couple of times. Like I've told them, I can't tell them enough how much that meant to me to, be getting ready to do this workout and see one of my best friends out there, who's more or less just there to cheer me on. Like those, it means a lot. I think, the shared experience, shared suffering brings people together. And that's part of the reason why the bonds that, I formed during being part of Army Wrestling are so deep, because we did a lot of really hard stuff together. Similarly, you have that same thing in the big Army as well. But the harder the shared experiences are, I think sometimes the deeper the bonds, because you really get to see who someone is during these moments where they're just going through extreme physical hardship. And that's probably the coolest part about being part of like the brotherhood of people who've made the games and have done some of these events or some of these trainings together. Will and I have done exceptionally hard stuff together. Like all these guys, we have things where we have, just really put ourselves out there and either gone to the limit to push ourselves, or gone to the limit for the advancement of the team. And when you do that, you know that this person has your back in a way that is so much deeper than them just saying like, hey man, we're friends, I've got your back. It's like, no, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm going to go out there and take that next set of thrusters because I care about you and I care about our team doing well, or I'm going to fly across the country when I could be doing games prep because I care about you and I care about the team doing well.
It's proof in the pudding rather than like just throwing up an Instagram post. That's like, it may give a societal perception, but it's not, you don't actually tangibly feel like they got your back.
Yeah.
That's really special, man. And you've been a part of a few different training camps. And I know some people choose to train on their own. There's so many different methods to the madness or ways to skin the cat in pursuit of trying to win the CrossFit Games. What are your thoughts on training camps? You've now been a part of, I think you've done some stuff with Training Think Tank. You've done some stuff with Comp Train. Now you've been a part of the Invictus tribe for a little bit. Like, what does that kind of mean for you? And how has it been training underneath different leadership styles?
Also, just got to plug in the Misfit guys, because that's probably the camp
cool.
I was most associated with and probably the one like that I worked with the longest.
Very cool.
I think there's so much to learn from how everybody approaches things in this space, because it's not a definite science. Like more or less, if you're training to become an Olympic rower, most of those folks are training, more similarly than not, right? They're going to have a huge off season where they're getting a ton of meters in, and then there's a certain way you ramp up before an event, because the sport's been around long enough and there's been enough studies by governments and things like that to know how to train for this thing. But our sport, you can't ever fully come to an answer, because things are always changing with what the tests are and what the events are. But our sport is also new enough where these answers aren't definitive yet. So I think by going in different spaces, one, you're exposed to your blind spots like we talked about earlier, because everyone has their own little biases. And even when you're aware of your biases, they still exist and manifest in some ways.
And if you're smart, you're really good at justifying them.
Yeah, exactly. And so by being able to move around and learn from these different folks, I feel like every time I go to a different place or space, I am able to come away with something new that like, oh shoot, I should be doing this, or this is something I didn't really realize was going to help me.
Do you document it? Like when you find something, are you like an Apple Note guy? Do you have like a little notebook where you write it down, or how does that like stick in your headspace?
I don't think I document those lessons as much as I document my training pretty intensely, and there's always notes around training. So I've been using Beyond the Whiteboard, not a plug. I've been using it for a decade.
Totally.
So every workout I've done, I think I'm close to like 10,000 workouts in there.
Nice.
So everything I've done in the last 10 years
man. Wow.
has gone. Even yesterday I was logging the workouts from this weekend. Everything gets logged. There's notes for everything. And then I also have an Excel sheet that covers like the last 4 or 5 years, and there's notes in that. So between those two methods of note taking, even whatever I'm learning on like a day-to-day basis is getting kind of plugged into there. But I don't think I'm taking notes on that other stuff, but I feel like these people walk things out, or there's so much practice that goes into how they do whatever they do that it ends up becoming part of my routine.
You put it into practice.
Yeah.
You at least try it. You tinker with it and you decide, is this for me or is it not? Mm-hmm. That's really cool. Where I'd like to wrap up our conversation, and it's probably one of my favorite things about you, is you have this unique sense of humor.
It's not true.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's hard to tell. Sometimes it's, as you described previously, a little bit of a power play for fun. But on your Instagram, dude, you're categorizing yourself as an airline company.
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
So a couple years ago, actually, this references maybe some of my best work of all time. So we landed for the Granite Games a couple years ago, and Jarrett Smith, he's one of the coaches of CompTrain, was going to pick me up, and he didn't know what airline we'd been flying, and he was like, "You guys just landed." He said, "JetBlue, right?" And I said, "No, it's a white plane." And I thought that was very funny. But within this interaction with JetBlue, I was also trying to get my tickets through their online app or something. And you know how they outsource all these things, so people aren't ever really tracking what's going on. And I was like, when I talked to you guys previously, you said this thing, and now you're saying this. And they asked me who I talked to previously, and within them asking me that, they're like, "What's your name?" And I was like, "I'm Chandler Smith." And within the confusion, they were like, "Chandler Smith isn't the name of the company." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm tracking, man. I'm Chandler Smith." And we went back and forth explaining this, but this guy was convinced that Chandler Smith was the airline company.
Yes.
Something was really getting lost in there. So I just kind of leaned into that. I felt like that guy saw something in me that maybe I hadn't seen in myself previously, that I had the potential to be a full-fledged air carrier.
I dig it.
And that's kind of been my ambition ever since. So this CrossFit thing is just a means to the end of becoming a self-sufficient, the world's first individual human who also serves as an airline company. And
JetBlue, watch out. Delta, American Airlines,
coming.
watch out. He's coming.
I'm manifesting that right now. And I think, it's not out of the realm of possibility with advancements to science and everything that's kind of going on with AI, to where I could maybe upload my consciousness into a plane. And I think we could build from there.
I love it. You saw a mountain across the horizon. You got there and you realized it was a pile of rocks.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
It's the opening line from a Mac Miller song called Ascension off of his 2015 album, Good AM. And in that quote, I feel like talks about that you think when you get a goal done, and we actually, we're kind of talking about this at the beginning of the conversation too. When you reach a goal, you think it's going to be this super awesome thing. And I felt when I set that goal in 2012 of wanting to become a CrossFit Games athlete, I thought it was going to be X, Y, and Z. And then you realize that once you've done it, one, you don't feel any more fulfilled, and that I didn't reach a level to where I could stop training or things got any easier, anything really changed. It was a sum of all the little things, I guess, that I'd done to get to that point. But it's life in general. I feel like it sums up my perspective in a lot of ways, and that it just is always a good reminder that I'm not going to be fulfilled by these things that when they're far enough off, they might look super grand. And
it's deconstructing the "I'll be happy when" mentality, which is a very dangerous way to think. I'll be happy when I get the promotion, when I make this much money, when I have the relationship. And it, in my humble opinion, zooms the lenses into the now and kind of suggests just being in the present. Because if you're in the past, you're probably battling a little of anxiety. If you're in the future, you're probably vice versa. Past, a little bit of depression. Mm-hmm. Future, a little bit of anxiety, because you're trying to predict what's potentially going to happen.
And I've experienced both of those extremes. So that really does make a bunch of sense. It's probably why I feel like that's such an important reminder for me to not get too far into planning, because that's something I want to do, and not to get too regretful, because I think I also have a tendency to, maybe overthink bad decisions I've made in the past as well. And it's just a reminder, right now you can
be where your feet are.
Yeah.
You have a deep connection to song lyrics, it seems. You've been attending a hip hop dance class with some friends of ours. You can clearly dance. You can move a little bit before some of the workouts. You definitely like to vibe a little bit to some of the music. Where does that come from? What's this connection to hip hop and dance and expressing yourself in that way? And, oftentimes deep thinkers really can resonate and relate to the creativity and the craft of whether it's rappers or performers, and how they articulate certain feelings or emotions that aren't really easy to say with words, because
Yeah.
you and I both know words they're an approximation of what we're actually trying to convey. And in essence, they're like hieroglyphics. But lyricists and artists have a way of doing that in a very euphoric, magical way.
Yeah, they're professionals at putting those words together.
Yeah.
I think so. The one thing I think that we haven't said that is something that you and I both say a lot is right. It's like it's not that serious. If you're so locked into getting ready to do an event that you can't have any fun or enjoy the fact that they're playing fun music or people are cheering and stuff, you're probably too far into whatever it is you're doing. If no one, another quote from one of my buddies, if no one's getting shot at, it's not that serious, right? Like no one's going to die. Everything that you've done, at least like when you're competing to do well for that event has already happened. So if you can't enjoy the moment that you're in, it's not serving you anymore to, put up this attitude that you're not having any fun or you're angry or something. Like all the work was done previously. And I think that's dance is kind of maybe me showing that that's where my headspace is at.
I like that. If you're so focused on the craft and the outcome, you forget to look up. Before you know it, you blink, that experience is gone.
Yeah.
You didn't get the opportunity to sponge it up or soak it up at all, which is tough because we go to our grave with memories. I want to spitball a couple things for you and kind of just get your, quick little 2 cents on it. Things that I hear you talk about and things that you've done. And that is defeating doubt. That's the first one. Like, I felt like a lot of people doubted you because of the broken hand this year. And you came out and you did exactly that. You defeated the doubt. You got the job done. Now you're moving on to the next phase. What does that mean to you?
I think it's not something to fixate on because people are always going to doubt you. And the more energy and attention you give those people, the more it's taking away from being focused on like what it actually is that you need to do to reach the goals that you're aiming for. But it is something that, inevitably plays a role in how you think about things. And it's not a super focus for me. It's at least outward facing. I want to defeat my own internal doubt because the more I do that, the more I can align my thoughts with things that I need to be oriented on in order to be successful. So defeating doubt is an internal battle, not an external one.
Love that. The next one is making a statement. I think you did that at Rogue for sure. I think you did that this weekend for sure. What does that mean to you to be back in the limelight of the CrossFit space and very similar to your airline company, let the rest of the competitors know, like, I'm not just here. I'm here to pursue the podium.
I think that's something that I believe, and I've believed since I started doing this, that I train well enough and hard enough to where that is a possibility. And the more that other people, there's always an element of doublethink to being an athlete. I think I try to ignore when people are saying, oh, he can't do this. I try to, if I'm getting doubts from an external source, I don't listen to it. But if you are getting support from people especially people who are close to you, but support in general, you can use that to help you as well. But whether or not everything has to be turned into fuel, like athletes got to be these engines that are capable of burning diesel and gasoline and J8 or whatever. Like you have to be able to, if people are saying good things about you, that's got to help you. See what people are saying negative things about you, that has to help you. And I think for me, I would much prefer if people believed in me, mostly because it's less of a distraction than people, trying to tear me down. But it doesn't super matter. The statement, again, is more for myself. I want to continue to confirm to myself, like my takeaway from the weekend is if I can compete with these guys and take some events off of guys who've been on the podium previously and are, going to fight to be there this year. There's no reason that if I come in healthy and continue to train hard and so on and so forth, that I can't compete with them in Madison or at a later point in time. So the statement is, I know this and I've been telling myself this for a long time, but if other people believe it, that also is something that could serve me. But also if they don't believe it, I don't really need them to as long as I do.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible, man. The last question I have for you kind of represents something I heard Kobe say one time, which is the true definition of success in sport is how you inspire the next generation. How do you want the Chandler Smith legacy to be read? How do you want to be remembered in the sport of CrossFit?
That's the most important thing for all of this stuff. You want to say that you've inspired people and everything, but I want to be able to look my kids in the eye the same way I've talked to my dad and we had a bunch of conversations about his career. I want to be able to look my kids in the eye and tell them like, hey, I did everything I could to maximize my talent in this space where your time is very limited. So that way, if they choose to do it, they'll also, they'll have that as an example, and I can definitively say this is what I did. And I also want to tell them I did it the right way. So knowing that I've done things to the fullest extent of my abilities and done them the right way, that means I can talk to anybody when I'm coaching high school wrestling down the road and say, regardless of the results, I did this and you can do this too, because I can't ask them to get results or anything that's outside of their control. All I can really ask them to do is to try their best and to do it with honor. Attitude and effort is how Ben would always say it. Like, those are the things that you can control. And if I've had a good attitude, maximize my effort, which also extends to doing things the right way, I did everything I could to be my best. And so I can, with confidence and authority, tell them that they can also do that. And then that represents them maximizing, their capacity for whatever it is they're trying to do.
I love that. I read something earlier today along the lines of, your kids will one day know who you actually are. Make sure you're worth knowing. I think that's a really cool one. And to wrap it up, man, like, you're represented by Ripple Sports, but you live it. You and Jesse come into the gym, and you're not just hitting it off with your boys and your training partners, hitting your training session, then getting out. You consistently respect the facility and clean up your shit. You say hello to the other members. You check in with them to make sure that their experience is really high. And that, to me, is the ripple effect. The analogy may be dropping, some sort of rock into a pond, and the ripple effect about how you carry yourself then positively impacts all of the people around you. And I just wanted to make sure I threw that in there so people know, like, your true, honest integrity and character. It's not just something you talk about. It's not a military cliche. It's actuality. And you guys live that with authenticity, and it's a pleasure to cross paths with you every day. And I really appreciate you doing this, man.
Hey, man, I've been happy to be here. The energy is always reciprocated. So you bring that same energy to the space, and anytime we get to reflect that and be a part of a space that's as special as the one we got, you got to recognize that that's a good opportunity. So grateful for that. Grateful for the chance to be on here and talk with you, and hopefully we get to do it again sometime.
Dope, man. Your vibe attracts your tribe.
Yes, indeed.
Guys, for those of you listening, if you enjoyed my conversation with Chandler Smith today, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Till next time. Bye-bye.
Are you over 35 and in need of a solid training program? Are you looking to improve your athleticism and keep up with the younger athletes in your CrossFit gym? Then look no further than our Invictus Masters program. This program places year-round emphasis on mobility and stability exercises with movements that we have seen directly benefit our Masters athletes. Our program is led by Nicole DeHart and offers a training program designed specifically for Masters athletes who are looking to compete at a higher level in the sport of CrossFit. Some of our top Masters athletes in the world train with us, including CrossFit Games champion Kevin Kester, Matt Beals, and Pat Sprague. You can learn more about their stories and the Invictus Masters program by checking out their episodes right here on the Invictus Mindset Podcast. If you'd like more information about the current training cycle or to join the Invictus Masters program, please email Nicole at invictusathlete.com. That's NICHOLE at invictusathlete.com.